All right, let's start in 2 minutes.
Okay, great. That sounds good. I am actually going to pull up a couple of resources here. I may use the exact language when we're doing the live stream.
Okay.
Because I think that will be helpful.
All right, we can get started.
All right, sounds great. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. This live stream is going to be about what kinds of media qualify to meet the EB-1A criterion. And this is actually pretty challenging, given that there's so many different types of media, and media is one of those things that is always changing and evolving. Back when I was in college, everyone was talking about the new media being blogs and podcasts and video and YouTube and all of these things. And to a degree, I think that still is considered new media type stuff with USCIS adjudicators. Government moves very, very slow. So government is very behind the times in what is considered popular, what is considered major media, and what has really big reach or really big impact or meaning within a profession or an occupation. So it can actually get really confusing on what qualifies as media. I am going to be kind of going back and forth here, reading some of the guidance from the policy manual, also reading a very important part of the regulation itself. I see people all the time who are seeking out media opportunities, and it looks good initially, but then it's missing a key element, or it's in something that USCIS doesn't really consider to be the proper type of media. When you look at the regulations themselves, so in the Code of Federal Regulations, there's actually some language in the media criteria itself that isn't on the website, and it's not really in the policy manual. I guess it is in the policy manual to some degree, but it's kind of hidden in the policy manual. So the criteria for media says that initial evidence can consist of published material in professional publications written by others about the alien's work in the academic field. Such material shall include the title, date, author, title, date, and author of the material, and any necessary translation. And actually, you know what? I read the EB-1B criterion. Sorry, it's late in the day. I'm actually going to reread that for you all. I was like, why does this say academic? Scratch that. So it says published material about the alien in professional or major trade publications or other major media relating to the alien's work in the field for which classification is sought. Such evidence shall include the title, date, and author of the material and any necessary translation. Oftentimes when I'm claiming the media criterion, I will actually put in the petition letter the title of that media article, and then underneath I will say the title is this, the date is this, the author is this, and then the subject matter is this. And I'll actually outline it for USCIS because those elements are super important. Some of them that are missing quite often are date or author. Date is an interesting one because not all major trade publications actually put the date on their materials, especially if you're going to one of their websites and all the material on that website is supposed to be evergreen material. Sometimes you can find the last updated by date, but it's not always there, and that can cause some difficulties and some issues. Most often, I actually see the author missing, and this is super, super important, especially in the current debate in the whole EB-1A world about whether or not you should pay for media and whether or not you should engage in self-promotion in the media. If there is not a third-party author, not you, identified, USCIS technically doesn't need to consider that media piece at all. This makes it really difficult for some legit sources, like magazines, which often only are attributed to an editor, and then they will list a bunch of contributors, but they won't actually say who the author of the article is. I've also encountered the situation more recently where someone wrote a large portion of a major trade publication, but they did not get their name attributed on it. And so I've seen that as well. That we were trying to claim in the authorship criterion context. But I see it sometimes in the media context as well, where we're trying to get some specific recognition because our client appears in one of these industry publications, and the author is noted as contributing staff or contributing editors or something like that, where like it's not really clear who wrote the individual piece about our client. So having title, date, and author is non-negotiable. It's super, super important. I will say, if you have lots of media coverage and you have a couple pieces of media that meet these strict requirements, and then the rest have some of these issues that I pointed out, you can include all of them to show USCIS the volume of evidence. Just make sure that you leave out anything that appears super weak, and make sure that the stuff you're putting in is very strong, because it only takes a couple of media articles to meet the technicality, and then any other evidence that you present goes to the final merits. So don't necessarily think you can't use any media that doesn't meet these criteria, but make sure that you include 1 or 2 or 3 at least if you're going to claim this criteria for your case. All right, so those are the requirements. Then there are separate types of media, right? So USCIS says it can be a professional publication, a major trade publication, or other major media. None of these 3 are really defined. USCIS does have some guidance on its policy manual. It says that USCIS alone is responsible for the determination of what kind of media it is. And it's really interesting because most EB-1As, the media will fall under professional publication. Occasionally it will go under major trade publication, but USCIS is almost always analyzing the media sources as if they were major media publications. So, for example, one of the things that comes up a lot in EB-1A adjudications is how much reach or how much impact does the publication have? And USCIS will say you didn't provide circulation numbers or you didn't show that this is a major media source, even if we're talking about the most niche professional publication in the field, where it doesn't make sense that it would ever be considered major media. USCIS still kind of wants that information. I think it is important in cases to kind of spell out and define what kind of media is this. If you can do this, your attorney working on the case will have a better time. But I think more importantly, if you can do this, you are putting yourself in a better situation, because then when USCIS comes back and questions it, you'll have the information ready to go. So professional publication, major trade publication, or major media publication. One thing worth mentioning, I think, as an aside, is around this whole kind of new media concept. A lot of people will come to me and they want to use podcast interviews or interviews on someone's YouTube channel or even like a LinkedIn live stream where someone has a huge following. These aren't necessarily time tested. So the rules are not well defined, but you can still claim them. In the EB-1A context, I wouldn't really claim a podcast that just has a few hundred followers. It may be one of the top ranked podcasts in your very particular niche field, but having a few hundred is just not going to be enough for USCIS. But if you make it on a podcast that is truly the top resource in your profession, or is major media where it has millions of subscribers, that can work. The important thing with that, anytime it's a multimedia or speech or video related, you need to have a transcript. And there's no real author, which makes this tricky because the authorship requirement is defined in law. But USCIS says it will accept transcripts, and that the transcript should make it clear who the interviewer is, because in that case, that person would be considered to be the author for that resource. Excuse me. I'm just dealing with a little cold today. All right, so let me think. I think those are the main issues. Jason, are you seeing any major questions come up that I didn't touch on or didn't cover?
Yeah. So what if you get covered in your company's blog and your company is a top company in the field? Does that count towards the media coverage criterion?
So I can't say that I've ever claimed this in isolation. So I haven't ever claimed the media criterion where the only media that we're putting forward is internal from the company's own blog. But sometimes I do include this as part of a body of evidence. This is particularly relevant, I think, when the company is a really well-known large company and they are highlighting a particular employee for an extraordinary innovation or for their leadership position. So you could have a scientist who made like the major defining breakthrough in something that's going to be the company's new product, or you could have the CEO doing some impressive conference talk or headline speech or something like that. So there's options to use it. I just don't know if I would rely on it in isolation. I would be hesitant, and I think it's something USCIS would likely challenge.
So Ranjit has a question. How old can the media coverage be, like in years?
Yeah, there's no real parameters on this either. So USCIS hasn't said the media has to be within the last 10 years or so. They are bound to at least fairly consider the evidence, even if it happened 50 years ago or something like that. I do work with people who are at the height of their career. They're in their 50s, potentially even in their 60s. And so it's entirely possible that they had some media publication about them as like a recent grad making a breakthrough innovation. And I would include that. Now, if it's the only article and if they haven't really received any updated media since then, I would be hesitant. It's important to emphasize all of the best parts of the case, right? So a person that advanced in their career probably doesn't need to claim media. They probably have other criteria that they can claim instead. But you can claim it. There's no restriction on it. And so it's about weighing what looks good for the case and going from there.
Abdul Hamid asks, what about newspaper publications and research news on university website?
Yeah, so this is really tricky because a university website is generally not going to be considered a professional publication or a trade publication. You could maybe argue that some particular, I don't know if they call them blogs, but like sections of a university website, if you have information about their audience, you could argue that it's a top source for professionals in a particular field. But most university websites don't have media kits. It's not like they release or announce that information. So all you're really left with is being able to claim that it's major media. You can look up stats like web clicks, visits, monthly viewers, that kind of thing, to try and build an argument that it's major media. But the vast majority of university websites aren't really going to be able to pass that kind of analysis. So I rarely include these in the media criterion. Rarely.
So Maud asks, or Mohammed asks, is research article impact factor also matter?
So I think you may be asking about authorship. Authorship and media get conflated a lot. Even in the language that I use, I conflate a lot of the terms sometimes. It is difficult to keep them straight. If you are asking in the media context, though, a lot of times you will have a journal, like a really prestigious, high-impact journal like Nature. And they might do a profile of a scientist, or they might really highlight an article that was written and then do an interview of the author of that article. That is great media coverage. Like, that is the definition of a professional publication, giving a person media coverage. So impact factor, I guess, to some degree does matter because it lends that kind of legitimacy and shows that the prestige and shows that this media actually matters. So I would actually highlight that. But it's rare to get those cases. I will say most people are going for media that's not quite as prestigious.
So no other questions that I'm seeing.
Okay.
So even if it's one of the top niche podcasts in your field, you still have to show high circulation numbers.
So you would want to be able to show not only subscriber numbers, but views of that podcast episode to show that it has had major reach.
So what if it's, I think we once spoke about getting covered on like one of the, like there's this blog that's well known for AWS topics.
Yes.
For covering AWS topics. And I know a lot of AWS engineers sometimes publish articles for that blog. So that doesn't really count towards media coverage, or does
it? Right. So usually I'm dealing with this in the authorship context because the client is the one writing the article. I don't know if AWS highlights other people, but other major blogs certainly do. Like they will do a profile on a particular person who's made major innovations in the field. It is a bit difficult to get USCIS to accept these because generally it's not going to consider any kind of blog to be professional media. You can certainly make the argument. Like I've tried to make this argument with the AWS blog before. I can't say that I really think USCIS accepted it. Case got approved in the end, but this was like one of several different criteria that we were arguing. So I didn't feel that they would accept the argument. The thing with blogs is that you would have to show that they're major media. And again, they don't have any kind of media kit that like shows nice little charts about circulation, audience, intended reach, and all of that. So you're left with websites like SimilarWeb where you're just pulling the monthly visits, the monthly viewers, and stats like that. I think it's a good argument. It's an argument that I would make, but I'm not supremely confident, I guess, that USCIS would accept it. So it would be nice if you are engaged in profile building and do get highlighted on one of these, try to get highlighted in a more traditional media source as well, so that you have more to work with when claiming the criterion.
Suki Rish asks, from an authorship media coverage perspective, serving as an editor for a technical newsletter within a professional society as well as contributing articles can be value added?
So I think this is just going towards authorship. Again, sometimes it is hard to separate these two criteria, but serving as the editor of the newsletter, editor within the professional society, and then publishing, contributing articles, I think would go more towards authorship and then potentially membership. But I would not argue them in the media context.
Abdul Hamid asks, what about newspaper publications?
Yes. Newspaper publications are actually fantastic. And this kind of goes to show, I think, the bias towards those more traditional media sources. Because USCIS understands a newspaper article, whereas they may not understand a podcast or something like that. So if you have the chance to get highlighted in a newspaper, that's fantastic. Keep in mind that a newspaper is not going to be a professional publication or a major trade publication. It will be classified as major media. So you need to show some kind of factor that justifies it for being major media. It can't be the tiny local newspaper of your hometown. It needs to have either large regional or hopefully national reach. Any newspaper that appears on national rankings is fantastic. Any newspaper where you can show it has millions of average readership in its circulation looks fantastic. There's a bunch of different things you can show there, and you can usually get those stats from the newspaper. The nice thing about newspapers is none of this is really hidden. Usually they do publish a media kit or something like that that enables you to prove that the newspaper has impact.
Renat asks, can a role be considered critical if your contributions directly led to a company securing over 200K in funding? What types of evidence can be used to justify this claim? And this is a pass role.
Yes, this sounds great for critical role. As far as types of evidence, I probably won't go down the list right now. You'll want evidence you were employed, like emails, reference letters, work product, presentations, like anything you can show that you worked there, and then some additional testimonials and objective evidence showing that you were actually instrumental in the company being able to get this funding. And it is fine that it's a pass role. Totally fine.
Is global non-US media coverage valuable?
Yes, definitely. You should still show all of the same things. So you need to show that the media is important nationally or in a very large region of the world. You will still need to provide those stats. You still need to provide necessary translations in a lot of cases, but it is valuable. And a lot of EB-1As, I'm claiming media based solely on foreign media coverage because I do work with EB-1A applicants who have never been in the US. So it's pretty common to do that.
That question was from Deval. Rokia asks, those having thousands of followers in a technical blog run by me matter? Does USCIS prefer LinkedIn followers?
This is tough. I've tried to make these arguments, but more in the authorship context, not in the media context. I tried it in earnest where it was really the only thing we were claiming for authorship in one case so far. It was a creative argument. It was not an accepted argument. So USCIS was not buying it. And I do think that we can keep trying. I think things like this actually go really well towards final merits. And it's kind of a shame USCIS doesn't seem to have a place to fit these things because they do actually demonstrate significant impact on the field or the industry. But I don't want to encourage you by saying, yes, it will definitely work because I have seen that USCIS doesn't really know what to do with it. They don't have the knowledge, I think, to make them comfortable approving the criteria based on this.
There's something to add there, if I may. Seems like, so you don't have to have something count towards the evidence, but it can still help you. As in, if you write for a top technical blog, that could still be a way to get speaking opportunities. That could be a way to get published in a journal. You can use those activities as stepping stones to activities that will count towards the criteria.
Yeah, absolutely. And in my opinion, this has impact. If you have thousands of followers on a technical blog, it means that what you are putting out is valuable. And so I would want to use it in some way. It's just we need to be creative in how we do that because USCIS isn't so familiar with that format. But Jason is totally right. It also opens up so many opportunities. And one thing that we talk a lot about in our EB-1A Strong course is, especially if you are more early stage profile building, Just putting yourself out there and networking in these groups, organizations, having this bias for action will get you more of those opportunities that actually matter in the future. Even if you're having a hard time figuring out how you're going to get activities that exactly match the criteria at the early stage.
And Sanika has the last question. But
Okay.
Mohammed asks, so newspaper publication should be U.S. based or can it be any country, states?
Any country or state. I often use foreign newspapers in the EB-1A.
Sanika asks, does the candidate's name need to be mentioned specifically in the media coverage? Does it count if the news coverage is about a research publication that the candidate has co-authored?
So yes, it does need to specifically mention you. It doesn't need to be all about you. Like they can talk about other people as well, but it does need to mention you by name, and it does need to somewhat relate to your field of expertise. And then for the second question, does it count if it's about a publication that you co-authored? Yes, but you do need to be mentioned in the media article as a contributing author.
Great. So no other questions. Let's end it there then.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.